Hello there, my little custard creams. This is a resource for Self-Love September. Self-Love September is something that I do every single year. It's become a tradition here on my channel, and other people like to chime in with their thoughts as well and put stuff out on their own channels or write about stuff on their blogs or social media platforms. September, in my world, has very much become about the concept of self-love, which is a concept that I credit with so much of my personal development, so much of my thriving and flourishing in business and in life, in my relationships, in spirituality, in creative autonomy, etc, etc. So it's really nice to be able to talk about it all month long here on the channel. So welcome to this video, settle in. I'm going to be hitting a really heavy topic today. This is really deep subject matter. I've decided to talk about abuse, healing from experiences of abuse, dealing with the aftermath of abusive situations and relationships. Now, I want to make it clear that I want to talk generally about abuse rather than, I want to talk about it as an umbrella term, right? So I want to talk about it overall rather than zooming in on any particular specific kind of abuse. So I'm not talking just about emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. I'm talking really about abuse as an umbrella term, because I want this resource to be as helpful for as many different kinds of people as possible, bearing in mind, of course, that there are going to be considerations that I ask you to kind of take on in this video, which may not necessarily be relevant to any experiences of abuse that you've had, or at least the experience of abuse that you have in mind, that you're currently healing from, that you're currently dealing with. So please be aware that because of the general nature of this video, there might not be necessarily as many helpful tips or insights for you and the kind of abuse that you have endured. It might be something that I definitely go into on the channel at another point. If there are videos that you want to see around this topic, if you want to make any suggestions whatsoever, please leave them down below. I will take them under advisement. I will definitely think about creating more resources just to be of service to people who are dealing with abuse or have dealt with abuse and are going through the aftermath or trying to free themselves from an abusive situation. One of the first things that I want to say about experiences of abuse that went on in your past at any point, whether you were a child or an adult, is that during the experience of abuse, whether it was just once or whether it was over a long period of time, you will have convinced yourself in your mind to downplay it, to ignore it, to suppress it, to convince yourself that it wasn't happening, to be in denial about it or partial denial about it. And even long after the abusive situation is past and you are not experiencing it anymore, you may still find those energies of denial and suppression lingering around the abuse and lingering around other situations in your life which may reflect the abuse or may just be forcing you to confront the abuse that you went through. So denial, suppression, downplaying, just ignoring the significance of what you went through, those things are very normal. That is actually part of the survival instinct which kicked in at the time to help you to kind of get through life and continue to carry on with mundane tasks, etc., while the abuse was taking place, kind of thing. So it's very normal in the aftermath of abuse for you still to be in denial about the extent to which it affected you or be suppressing memories, etc. And I think that's just kind of a leftover often from the survival instinct, and it's a leftover that causes a lot of problems for somebody after they come out of an abusive situation. It's almost like a pattern that they've moved into of suppressing, downplaying, ignoring, denying, etc. Any denial, any downplaying of the abuse was designed to convince yourself that it was okay to continue within the abusive relationship, either because you saw no way out or because you really didn't have any way out. And a lot of the time that denial and that downplaying is also very much designed to convince other people. It's designed to convince people around you. It's designed to calm their nerves or almost manipulate them into believing that there's nothing wrong. You're trying to hoodwink other people so that they don't step in and try to help you out of the abusive situation, which could make things worse for you. You could have felt very much emotionally held hostage to your abuser, and when loved ones came in and tried to convince you to leave, that might have really frightened you, and you might have tried to convince those people that there was nothing abusive going on. So there's a number of different factors when it comes to the suppression, the denial, the downplaying. A lot of it is to convince the self, but a lot of it is also constructed to convince others, or at least to keep their concerns at bay so that the abusive relationship can continue continue unhindered, either because you are afraid of what's going to happen if somebody tries to step in, or because you do not feel ready to leave the abusive relationship yet. You are in emotional bondage. You are somehow tied in servitude in some way to your abuser. So if any of this resonates with you and you've been feeling weird about the denial or the downplaying, the suppressing of the abuse, the memories of the abuse, or just how much it affected you, just really know, first of all, right off the bat, that that is normal. That is something that a lot of people that have experienced some form of abuse do go through. And I think the most self-loving way to come at it really is just to allow yourself to just open up to the possibility of seeing the abuse for what it was. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not something that can even happen in a short period of time for a lot of people. But I often feel like just basically looking in the mirror at yourself, taking a deep breath and doing a deep exhale and just saying, I'm ready to accept the full magnitude of what happened. I am ready to understand its effect on me. I am ready to confront any issues which are lingering as a result of what I went through. I am prepared to see the full enormity of what this has done to me, and I'm prepared to deal with it in a real way. You can breathe in and close your eyes and hold your hands over your heart, and you can say, I'm ready to accept the full effect that the abuse has had on me, and I'm not going to pretend anymore. Something as simple as that. It can feel really meaningful, especially when you say it out loud, when you're closing your eyes, you've got your hand on your heart, or when you've got your eyes open and you're looking into a mirror. Those words are there to confirm just the willingness that you have to recognise how much of an effect it's had on you. And like I said, it's not a magic cure. It doesn't immediately mean that you're going to snap into reality and you're going to go, oh yeah, you know, I feel really messed up about that and I feel like it's really time to unpack that. It might not necessarily happen that way for you, and that is okay. But I think sometimes just that confirmation that you are prepared, that you are ready to recognise the effect it's had on you can be very powerful. When you're experiencing abuse and you're lying to yourself and also maybe to other people about the extent of that abuse, the effect it's having on you, the danger that you may be in, etc., you're actually learning how to deceive, you're learning how to manipulate. And I think that's something in the more shadow work area of things that we do also need to recognise. We need to recognise that we picked up skills during our time of being abused that were connected very much to deceit and manipulation, gaslighting people, just as we probably in turn were being gaslit by the abuser, and all of that stuff kind of bleeds into different situations and different relationship dynamics in your life. So if you know that you dealt with a period of abuse and during that period you downplayed the extent of the abuse or you lied to others about what was going on, you may need to recognise that you have those learned behaviours that are based around manipulation or downplaying or pretending, and you may need also to be prepared to unpick those things or recognise where they might be causing trouble in your life at the present time. Again, it's really important to come to this kind of work self-lovingly, and I always say this about anything that's a bit shadowy, anything that makes you look at yourself and go, oh, that wasn't my finest hour, or I'm doing that and I don't like the fact that I'm doing that, you know, all of those kinds of things, those insights that you're having into that shadowy stuff, you need to hold them to yourself. You need to hold the space to process those things. Ensure that you are not criticising yourself. You're not being mean to yourself about what you're discovering. You're really discovering from a place of non-judgment and from a place of a desire to make your life better and be the best version of yourself. Sometimes you've got to really look at the shit that is in the sediment of the experience you've had, and you've got to dig that up. You've got to excavate it. You've got to look at it and say, you know what, these things are still having control of me. These things are still taking over the narrative. But you don't need to slap yourself or berate yourself or be cruel to yourself to do that work. You can do that work whilst holding yourself close. You can do that work whilst acknowledging that that work needs to be done, but it doesn't necessarily have to go hand in hand with self-loathing. That's not a foregone conclusion. That's a decision that you make, and you can make a different decision. You can make a decision which brings you more closely into alignment with self-love. You might find that you tend to lie about how you're feeling. You might downplay your emotional responses to things. People might ask you for an honest answer and you might find that you don't give that honest answer. You might find that you downplay the true desire that you have to attain certain goals or to change certain dynamics. There could be all kinds of different ways in which you are stopping yourself from speaking your truth, and those things could stem from the behaviours that you picked up during experiences of abuse, where you silenced yourself, where you tried to lie to yourself yourself about what was going on, where you trained yourself not to have a voice because it was dangerous to have a voice. And so you might notice that those behaviours that you picked up during the abuse are definitely bleeding into different areas of your life. But remember, it's about hugging yourself close. It's about recognising that, again, as I said, from this place of loving non-judgment. You can really have a look at what other kinds of crappy strategies you picked up during your time of experiencing abuse. Are there other things that you do in the here and now that you picked up during that time that are really still having a negative effect on your life, that are causing all kinds of mischief for you? Remember that you owe yourself the chance to release that kind of bondage. You deserve to be able to move past it, to be able to move on from it. And if it's a leftover from the abuse which is still plaguing you, then that's definitely worth confronting, and it's definitely worth giving some time and some focus to on your self-development journey. A lot of people find, for example, that they are very subservient in their friendships and in their connections with people, and they may find that that comes from the pattern of abuse that they experienced, and it's an ongoing thing for them. Other people might find that they struggle to voice their feelings in an honest way, so they move into passive aggression and that kind of thing, and that could be as a result of the abuse that's kind of channeled your behaviour down certain lines. And one of the most important reasons to pick up on behaviours which might have stemmed from the abuse that you suffered is in order to avoid getting back into the same kinds of abusive dynamics. A lot of people look at their lives and they recognise that there's actually a pattern of falling back into abusive dynamics with people. If we have learned, for example, the habits of silence and subservience and passivity and docility because of an abusive connection that we've been through, then it's quite possible that those traits that we've learned and that conditioning that we've had moulded into us makes us actually more vulnerable to a secondary abusive relationship or an ongoing pattern of abusive relationships. So it's well worth looking at these things that have been drummed into you by the abuse you've suffered and working to unpick them so you can have more meaningful, healthier relationships, not relationships which are centered on a pattern of abuse. Whether you experienced abuse in just one singular event or an ongoing pattern of abuse, please know that feelings of guilt and shame are normal, but we always need to work to neutralize them and to recognize that it is not our fault. It's certainly something which is incredibly common, and that is a comfort to some people to know that they are not alone in those feelings. And people that have gone through specific kinds of abuse can certainly bond with each other and come to understand each other and offer each other empathy, which is a really good thing. And like I said, it is commonplace, but it's certainly something we would work to unpick. We would work to neutralize that. We would always work towards recognizing and holding close the realization that it's not your fault, and that you don't need to feel guilty and you don't need to feel ashamed. And for a lot of people, it's an incredibly long road to getting to that point where they truly do recognise that it's not their fault and that they don't need to keep carrying around this guilt and this shame. So many people spend a lot of time and a lot of energy thinking about what they could have done differently, what they should have done to avoid the abuse, how they were a target for the abuse in a way which must have been intrinsically their fault. And you've got to really listen to this narrative that's going on in your mind if this is indeed something that you're going through. And you've got to think to yourself, would I ever talk to somebody else like that? If somebody came to me, a loved one, for example, and was talking to me about their experiences of abuse, and they were talking about how guilty they felt, how ashamed they felt, how it was all their fault, would I let them carry on talking like that without interjecting and assuring them that it's not their fault and they don't need to feel that shame? And the answer will normally be, fuck no, I wouldn't want that person to feel ashamed. It would be my instinct, it would be my deepest possible intuitive hunch to say, honey, it's not your fault. You don't need to carry that guilt, darling. You didn't do anything wrong. And if those are the kinds of words that you would offer to somebody else, then you've got to be prepared to turn that good energy back on yourself. You need now to give those words to yourself. You've got to bestow those words upon you. Try going there as a creative visualization. I think this is something that can be really useful, to just kind of close your eyes and think about how you would help somebody that was dealing with experiences of having been abused, dealing with the aftermath of abuse or memories coming up. Think about the space that you would hold for somebody that was in need of that support. Think about the words that you would give to them. Think about the loving way in which you would listen to them, hear them out, and really then, you know, go through it with them, empathize with them, just basically be that listening ear and give all love and all high vibes and all good energy. And when you're visualizing yourself doing that for somebody else, get it really to that point where you can feel that your vibration has lifted just at the mere thought of bestowing this love, this attention, and this space holding onto another person. And then what you want to do is you want to take all of that and you want to download it into yourself. Push it into every pore of your being, every fibre, every vein, every atom, every fucking molecule of you. Put all of that love, all of that attention, all of that space holding energy, all of that wondrous high vibed empathy, give it to yourself, babe. Give it to yourself. If you can give it to someone else and you recognize the importance of doing that, you can also give it to you, and you're sorely in need of it. So give it to yourself. When we start to unpack abuse, whether it was a singular event or whether it was an ongoing thing, a lot of difficult and confusing feelings come up. You may feel, for example, and this is just one example of many, you may feel resentment and anger towards your parents for what you see or feel was a failure to protect you from a predator. That is a very natural response. That's something that is worth working through. That is something that needs to be confronted and looked in the eye during a sincere journey of healing. When we unpack things like this, yes, we do come up against really difficult experiences like that, where we are feeling resentful, we are feeling angry, we're dealing with shame and guilt within ourselves, but we're also dealing with wanting to lash out at others whom we feel did not protect us. Another thing which is really uncomfortable, which does come up a lot of times for people who have been going through long-standing periods of abuse with a loved one, whether it was a partner or a family member, is feelings of missing them, feelings of still loving them, feelings of still wanting to seek their approval or have their attention. And that can be incredibly difficult in the brain box. That can be a hell of a nasty time when someone realizes that they're actually missing their abuser. They're wishing they could have that connection back. They're wishing for just one more chance to win their abuser's love or approval. That can be obviously very confusing. It can feel very hypocritical, very contradictory, and you can sometimes think to yourself, well, it mustn't have been abuse then if I'm missing this person, if I'm, still in love with this person, if I still feel the need to be validated by this person who abused me. But it's important again to realise these feelings are normal. It's normal to have them, and it's normal to go on a journey towards releasing yourself from them or neutralising them. Do not berate yourself or attack yourself for feeling love for your abuser or missing your abuser, okay? These things are very complicated. At any time in life when there is an ongoing pattern of abuse, we can actually really convince ourselves that that abusive dynamic is love. We start to equate it with love. This is not just something that happens with childhood abuse, although of course it is particularly prevalent with childhood abuse because we are learning the dynamics from the adults around us. We're learning the dynamics. So if an adult teaches us a dynamic that is completely fucked up in some way, we will take that into us and we will internalize it as the framework for what love is all about, and we will want to continue to seek it, or we will certainly miss it. But it happens in adult abuse as well. We can convince ourselves, for example, that we have a really loving relationship with a romantic partner, even when it is laced with abusive behaviour that we're trying to ignore or downplay. When we have been coerced into thinking of a certain situation as loving, as ideal, as the only thing that we're worthy of, or the only thing it's worth trying to strive for, that is very powerful. That is potent conditioning that goes right to the core, and it's okay to need to take your time to unpick that stitching. The reality is that you can't shut these feelings off overnight. I often recommend that you use words of power to bring you back to center whenever you might be kind of going off onto one of these tangents where you are really missing your abuser, or you're resenting people who didn't protect you, when you are wanting to seek love from your abuser again, or you're telling yourself it was your fault. When you're going on those kinds of tangents that you are fully aware are not helpful and are making you feel worse, try to have those words of power to bring yourself back to, or those simple spiritual exercises that you can call upon in a crisis situation where you can really bring yourself back to the strength inside of you and just get back to that sense of calmness, hit that neutral button. Know that you've got tools available to you for that, and it's about having the options to use those tools when you feel like you're going on one of those crappy tangents and it's really painful for you and it's not helping you. The word forgiveness can be incredibly loaded when it comes to discussions about abuse, and that is because everybody's situation is so different and everybody's views on the concept of forgiveness are very different. So there is no one size fits all thing. There's no pill that we can all swallow on this. We have to come at it from our own place and we have to think about what's right for us. I'm going to leave a video down below about forgiveness, which I made a while ago, which you can watch if you are considering what kind of role the concept of forgiveness might have to play in your own journey through an abusive relationship of any kind, or dealing with an abusive event that occurred to you. Really thinking about how forgiveness might or might not play a part in your narrative at the current time. I know that for me, with the forgiveness that I've done around certain things that happened to me and certain ways in which I was treated in the past, I didn't forgive those people for them. Those people never came to me and asked me for forgiveness. I didn't forgive them so they could sleep soundly at night. I forgave them for myself. As Marianne Williamson says about forgiveness, taking the hook out of you takes the hook out of me. And for me, personally, on my journey, that proved to be very true. I realised that when I forgave, when I accepted, when I let go, and when part of that process for me was forgiveness, it helped me to lighten my load. I felt unfucking burdened. And I did that for me. And, you know, that's the concept of forgiveness that worked for me when I was going through my shit, but it might not work for you. Your mileage definitely might vary. And one thing I want to make abundantly clear in the course of this video is that no one can force you to forgive. And nobody should feel that they have the right to pressure you down a road of talking about forgiveness or bringing forgiveness necessarily into your healing journey. That's for you to decide. That is for you to come to. Only you can figure out whether or not forgiveness is going to be a part of your story, whether the word forgiveness even resonates with you in relation to your experience of abuse. That's something for you to decide. You have that autonomy. So don't ever let anyone pressure you. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like that is the next logical step and that's the route you've got to go down. Sit with you, listen to what's right for you personally. You might want to open up to people that you trust in your life. You might feel like you are confident to allow someone or a number of people to hold space for you. You might want to open up to somebody professionally rather than open up personally. You might feel like it's time to do that and it's something that you need. Please be aware though that not everybody is equipped to talk about abuse. Some people are going to find it uncomfortable. Even if they try to hold space for you, you might actually feel that there is a level of discomfort coming through from them. Try not to take that personally. Some people are trained for months and years to talk to people about abuse and hold space for people who need to talk about different kinds of abuse. And when someone hasn't had any training and they may not necessarily have the particular kind of personality type that is really good at holding space to talk about subjects that are difficult, then you might find that the response is not what you expected or desired. So try not to take it personally and try not to think that it is a reflection on you. It's not a reflection on you. Actually, there are tons of different groups and communities, online and offline, that exist to enable people who have been through specific kinds of abuse to talk to each other and form community around their experiences. And a lot of that is because it's really difficult to get that empathy and get that really good space held by people who've never been through those kinds of experiences. So try not to take it personally. Do open up if you feel like it's time to open up, but recognize at the same time that there are lots of different ways to open up and have space held and get into interactions about these things. And sometimes where you go for your help might not necessarily be where you ultimately land. Sometimes we have to kiss a few frogs before we find our prince when it comes to getting space held for us, okay? It's not always the right choice first time, so just try not to take any experiences like that personally, and don't let those experiences make you clam up. If you feel like it's time to get space held and it's time to talk about this stuff, you know, let yourself do that. Find a way of being able to do that. The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." Freedom is what you do with what's been fucking done to you. God, oh my God. Yes, yes. Say it with me one more time. Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. That's been really important for me on my journey. I have often thought about what I'm going to do with what I've been through. How am I going to make it work for me? What am I going to create from it? And that might be a really helpful thing for you to consider if you feel like you're on that part of your journey where you can start to think about how you're going to use the gifts that come from darkness, the strength that comes from terrible experiences. It's all about alchemy, baby. It's all about alchemy. And you might not be there at this point, and that's okay, but you may reach that point. And even if you're not there right now, please live in the knowledge that that point could come to you. Because I definitely went through periods where I didn't feel like I'd be able to extract any pith, any juice, any goodness, any glory from some of the shit that I'd been through. And actually it turned out I fucking could. I could. And so it comes, it does come. And just know that if you're not there yet, you might get there at some point. And it's very much a possibility. It's a possibility. In fact, there's a high probability that you will get there at some point. Anger is a part of the process when it comes to looking back on situations of abuse that you suffered. Anger is completely a part of the process. It's something that really needs an exit wound. It's something that we need to express. It's something we need to be allowed to feel. We cannot suppress it. We must not shut it off. But the way that I always like to think about anger during my processes of dealing with the aftermath of abuse is in whether or not it was really useful to me. After a while, you can get stuck on the merry-go-round with anger. You know, you can strap yourself in and you can just keep going through, and you can think about where to apportion blame and whose fault it was, and you can get really angry that things didn't happen differently. But what I've recognised about a lot of my life is that that anger was only eating me up. It wasn't solving anything, it wasn't helping anything, and it certainly wasn't hurting my abuser. It was just hurting me. It was eating me alive. And at a certain point, you have to decide that you are not going to put yourself through another round of abuse by fucking yourself over, by keeping you strapped into an energy of stagnation. You've got to decide that you're not going to let yourself be abused a second time by you, because you are still stewing and you're still ticking over and over and over, and it's all gone to mush and you're in it and it's yucky and you're up to your neck in it and it feels like a fucking oil slick. Don't do that to yourself, and remember, it's not the abuser doing that to you. After a certain point, we must take accountability for the fact that we're doing that to ourselves. And maybe that's a really heavy and a really harsh way to end this video, but I felt like I couldn't end the video without saying that. So I had to make a choice. I had to recognise that my anger had become supremely unproductive, and it was a way just to stay stuck and stay safe and not take risks and not play the bigger game in life. And so I decided to drop a lot of it. I decided to go through that process of forgiveness, acceptance, surrender, release, however you want to see it, whatever name you want to give it, whatever paradigm you want to work in. It's really about dropping that stuff so you can actually free yourself up to do creative things, to do spiritually fulfilling things, and to have better relationships that you are worthy of. Thank you so much for watching this resource. I hope it's given you some advice if you need it. I hope it's given you something to hang on to if you feel like you're swirling in the void a little bit right now. I really appreciate you giving me your time. I genuinely really do. And if you want to discuss your own experiences, or you want to give us a slice of your own story, please do so below in the comments section. You can also use the hashtags if you want to put anything out on your own platforms. Much love until the next resource. September is not over yet, so I've got more coming. Blessed be, guys. Mwah. Oh, I found an altar space. Just set up here.